Vicentillo wasn't just a cooperator. He was an heir to a protected empire who turned that protection system inside out, exposing the very relationships that kept the Sinaloa cartel untouchable. He wasn't supposed to end up in a courtroom. He was supposed to inherit everything. The connections, the protections, the system his father built over decades. But when Vicente Zambada Niebla was arrested, everything changed. Because this wasn't just another trafficker. This was the heir. And what he knew wasn't just about shipments or money. It was about relationships, the kind that make people untouchable. And once he started talking, it didn't just affect his case, it exposed how the system actually worked. Vicentillo was born in 1975, and there remains a stark contrast between him and the juniors that are running the Sinaloa cartel, if that's what you can call it at this point, today. He was around and conscious of the earlier days of his father's empire as he was building it. Mayito Flaco and Ivan Archibaldo, the two juniors, Ivan, one of Chapo's sons, and Mayito Flaco, one of Mayo's sons, were born in 1982 and 1983. Vicentillo came up in a different time and absolutely was considered the golden child by his father. So much so that in times of war, when the Sinaloa cartel had enemies, when El Mayo had enemies, those enemies sought to take out Vicentillo. From what I read in the book El Traidor, which was written by Anabel Hernandez, using the personal notes of Vicente Zambada and testimony from his lawyer Gacciola, who was notorious for brokering the deals or helping broker deals for the Sinaloa cartel, for Chapo and Mayo.
There's an attorney that was like making these deals for them, and when you hear those things, it scared me. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn, man, they're making deals to turn in people. How are we gonna be safe? And not only when I say they gave permission, they assisted on that cooperation, like a third party, which is common in the government.
From my understanding, the golden child Vicente was raised to be the thoughtful one, was raised to be the one that the father can count on. Although they say a whole bunch of different ways that Mayo didn't want Vicente in the game, and they say Vicente didn't want to be in the game, but it looks to me he was being groomed for the position. Groomed for a position that hadn't existed before, and before that was only held by his father, the person who invented the position. The position of the man in power that again had politicians and police in his pockets like so many nickels and dimes. In the book you hear stories of the Arellanos trying to take him out, stories of his father blessing him with a bulletproof vehicle, bodyguards, and at some points just calling him back home to keep him safe. My belief is that Vicentillo was supposed to hold the key to the next 50 years of cartel activity in Sinaloa. Vicente Zambada Niebla was never just meant to be another name. He wasn't built for the streets. He wasn't built to be reckless. He was built to inherit. His father, El Mayo, didn't build power the way others did. He didn't chase attention. He didn't chase headlines. He built something different, something quieter, deeper, a system. And Vicentillo was supposed to be the one to carry that system forward. Not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but for the next 50. He was the future of a network that relied on trust, on relationships, on understanding that sometimes power doesn't come from violence. Sometimes it comes from who you know. And through the connections of his father over the years, starting very early in his life, Vicentillo got to know a lot of people. In reading the book El Traidor, it was constant references of, my father sent me to see this general, my father sent me to see that general, to see this chief of police, to see this liaison between the government and the cartels, to facilitate this group or this mission, this drop, this pickup. Though kept on a need-to-know basis, Vicentillo was actively his father's ears, eyes, and voice in the outside world. He was an extension of his father's arm. To understand Vicentillo, you had to understand what he was stepping into. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't random deals in the shadows, in the darkness. This was structure. Long-term relationships built over years, sometimes decades, between people who had everything to lose and to gain. Politicians, military, law enforcement. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to create something dangerous. Predictability. Because when you can predict outcomes, you don't have to react. You control the game. And that's what El Mayo built. Not just routes, not just money, but stability. Inside of instability. And Vicentillo was supposed to inherit all of it. The connections, the understanding, the quiet agreements that never needed to be spoken out loud. All the Sinaloa secrets were his for the taking. No back alley deals. He had the benefit of a corporate-like structure, and his father just happened to be the CEO. And as much as he didn't want to be in the game, quote unquote, from what we hear in the book, he played it well. From facilitating shipments to putting the wheels in motion for murder. When Vicentillo ordered his first murder, he was 22 years old, and his second son, Jesus Miguel, was just a newborn. He joined the Zambada family's criminal underworld on December 10, 1997. Vicentillo seemed to be built for the job, and I've heard both Flores twins, Jay and Peter Flores, say that he was different from the other guys. They liken him more to El Mayo, El Chapo, Arturo Beltran Leiva than they would Maito Flaco, Ivan Archibaldo, Alfredo, and the rest of the juniors. Cut from a different cloth, a boss. But systems don't get tested when they're working. They get tested when something breaks. And for this system, it was Vicentillo's arrest. When you arrest someone like him, you're not just arresting some drug trafficker. You're arresting access to information, to relationships, to the inner workings of something that was never supposed to be exposed. And then everything changes. The question isn't what did he do? So what does he know? And let's not get it twisted. Vicentillo's arrest was a surprise, but his cooperation wasn't. See, before he was arrested, he traveled to Mexico City with the permission of his father and the permission of his friend Chapo to turn himself in and cooperate with the United States government. And he had meetings with Chapo's DEA people, again, with permission from his father and Chapo. And in the process of those meetings, before they sealed the deal, his sicarios were spotted guarding the place where he was staying during these meetings. Someone reported them, and they swooped in and arrested Vicentillo before he was able to finalize his deal that he was turning himself in for. The irony. So again, his arrest was a surprise. His cooperation was not. And as we discuss the system, let's not overlook the fact that very early on in Vicentillo's cartel past, El Mayo made it very clear to him to keep El Chapo close because El Chapo's DEA connections would be something important for them in the future. I need you to come with me to see my friend Chapo, and he's going to feel that you're his friend too. My friend Chapo is a very important person. He's not the same one we met a while ago. You have no idea of the tremendous power he has, all the friendships and all the friends he has. Someday, if something happens to me, you're going to need good friends, and he's a good friend. And Mayo never clarified why El Chapo had become so powerful. Who were those friends? Over time, Ray and Vicentillo would learn that these friends were agents of the United States Government Drug Enforcement Administration, with whom El Chapo had made contact since his imprisonment. Future came. And those are the same DEA contacts that Vicentillo used after he was given permission to turn himself in and testify. The U.S. government believed I could provide them with information about the Vicente Carillo Fuentes group and the Arellano Felix group. Each of these groups was a rival of the Sinaloa cartel. I told them I needed El Chapo's approval. I received El Chapo's approval while he was in prison. If I did this, the agents promised they would help me dismiss the indictment. In 2004, I provided the United States government with additional information about the activities of other drug cartels in Mexico. And let's not pretend that El Mayo wasn't into the same type of finger-pointing behavior. Vicentillo, the prince, the golden child, in his book made it extremely clear that the Sinaloa cartel was built off the back of setting people up with law enforcement. They didn't feel like fighting their enemy that day, they turned them in. It's not a new structure. It's a structure that's been around. It's the way they won the Arellano War. It's the way I'm sure they've won many wars. It's the way I'm sure they've built their cartel. All of it built on cooperation. All of it built on snitching. All of it built on setting people up. All of it built on betrayal. Meanwhile, you think they fought a fair fight. Nah. El Chapo said that lawyer was with the DEA with his permission, and that everything they were doing, the arrests of members of enemy groups and all of that, was based on information from him and my dad, and that the DEA was the one acting with the Mexican government. At first, cooperation doesn't look like betrayal. It looks like strategy, leverage. And in a system like this, that's not unusual, because cooperation has always existed, quietly, strategically, used when necessary.
The thing that people don't understand about how this game really works, you have to get to the top to understand it, is kind of see the dirtiest part of it. I hate to say it this way, but at the end of the day, it becomes like a business deal. You're making a deal to save yourself. And they look at it just like that, like whether they were going to kill you or set you up, and just part of the game, you know, and this is what we do. And I just didn't want to be one of those victims.
But this was different because of who he was. Vicentillo wasn't just another operator trying to reduce time. He was someone who understood the structure, the protections. And at some point, something shifts. And what started as controlled doesn't stay controlled. Information expounds, details build. And the line between strategy and exposure, that begins to disappear. Once that line is gone, there's no putting it back. I don't know what Mayo and Chapo had in mind when they sent Vicentillo to turn himself in. I do know that in reading his book, which to me reads as a list of brainstorming to prepare for his cooperation, a lengthy list of politicians and people in positions of power, a lengthy list of quote-unquote legitimate businesses connected to the game. He knew who got what to where, how they did it, where they hid it, who controlled this plaza, who controlled that town, who was in charge of the semis that brought the product across, who was in charge of the trains, who was in charge of the planes. He said it all in the book. I don't have the transcript of his trial in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he spilled that and then some in the courtroom. And even more than that, sitting at a table behind closed doors with the DEA. And as I said before, I'm not sure that's what Mayo and Chapo had in mind. I don't know if it was Mayo and Chapo's intention for him to expose everything, but the amount of names that I heard was staggering, which made me believe that he is probably the most prolific government informant in cartel history. At some point, this stops being a negotiation and becomes something else, a release, a flow of information that goes beyond what anyone expected. Because when someone like Vicentillo talks, it's not just about one operation or one group. It's about how everything connects. Not just about who's involved, but how it all worked together.
Based on my cooperation, is like, I think the most value I probably could have gave to the government was telling on Vicente, who happened to be already one of the most valuable informants, okay, before he came in, and probably became the most valuable and most, important cooperator, informant, and everything you could think of. You just imagine all the details he said in his book. Just imagine everything he said behind closed doors, okay? And I think that information alone was worth its time in gold. I think you covered the story, and I think that people overlooked that.
And this is where things change, because now it's not just about the cartel. It's about the system around it. The kind of system that doesn't exist without cooperation on multiple levels. What Vicentillo revealed wasn't just information. It was confirmation. Confirmation that this wasn't random. That protection wasn't accidental. That relationships existed and they mattered. This wasn't about one cartel being smarter than the other. This was about understanding the environment better than anyone else. Vicente Zambada, a man that ordered murders, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. After cooperation and good time, he served roughly 12 years total. And now is a free man in witness protection.
Obviously, Vicente is like, the biggest one of them all. And he's somewhere out here, free man. Wish him the best. Wish him and his family the best, He did what he had to do as well, and totally different situations, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, he had permission from people to do it, and I didn't.
And this is where the real impact begins. Not in the courtroom, but in the aftermath. Because what Vicentillo did unlocked three things. First, it exposed protection networks. Maybe not in detail, but enough to confirm they existed. That this wasn't just survival, this was integration. This was part of their system. Second, it normalized cooperation at the top. It showed that this wasn't rare. This was a tool used when necessary. And third, it killed long-term trust. Because once these kinds of relationships are exposed, they can't function the same way. And that changes everything. Because what came after wasn't a stronger system, it was a weaker one. The next generation didn't inherit what Vicentillo was supposed to. They didn't inherit relationships, connections, protections. They inherited money. And without those long-term connections, everything becomes temporary. Deals instead of trust. Short-term wins instead of long-term stability. And that's what we're seeing now. Fragmentation, internal conflict, instability. Because now there is no system, just deals. You get a deal. You get a deal. You get a deal.